Good afternoon, everyone. Bershus, Rav Schachter Shlita, Rav Rosensweig Shlita. My name is Rav Reuven Brand, and I'm a Talmud of the Yeshiva. And for the past almost 18 years, I have been the extension of the Yeshiva in Chicago, Illinois, where we established the first YU out-of-town full-time kollel. And this is an extraordinary moment for me because 18 years ago, at that time it was in the Reuben Shul, this building didn't even exist. Rav Schachter and Rav Rosensweig sat together during lunch with a group of Talmidim, and we spoke about the concept of what it would be to create for the first time a kollel in a community. And at that time, it was Hayinu Kecholmin. It didn't exist. I was learning here in the Kollel Elyon. We had a group of Talmidim who were going to be the Nachshon and Ben Aminadov door. And since then, the Kollel has had an extraordinary outsized impact on the community. But even more importantly, in certain ways, it has helped develop Talmidim from our yeshiva to take their next step in their Avodas HaKodesh, as Rachanchim, as Rabbanim, as leaders of the community. So today I'm privileged to, as a Talmud, be back with my Rabbeim and to invite them to share a little bit of perspective for the Talmidim today on what it means for you, for a Talmud, to be learning, matriculating, developing, specifically in a kollel that's in the community. And so maybe, Rav Schachter, maybe you would begin just a thought of why it is that somebody who's in the yeshiva should consider taking their next step of learning dafka in an out-of-town kollel like ours.
Years ago, Orthodox rabbis did not make a living. And it was a common practice here. Well, my father was a student here. When your father was a student here, that many of the students, when they graduated Yeshiva College, they went to the Jewish Theological Seminary because the conservative rabbinate paid much more. Now, you make a living. If you go to Chinuch, you make a living. And you go into Orthodox Rabbanos, you make a living. In Chicago, you can have it happens that there's a lot of sipuk nefesh. I visited Chicago a few times since in the last 18 years, sometimes for the kollel, sometimes not for the kollel. The people in Chicago say that this kollel had a tremendous influence on all the students and all the balabatim. Had a tremendous hashpah. In other places, when you go into chinuch, you don't feel that. Over there, you feel it. The city was sleeping for many years. They had a lot of big Talmidei Chacham, but the city was sleeping. And they this kollel woke them up. They had boys learning with the younger people, and then high school students, and with adults, with the many different venues. It's a tremendous opportunity, and many of the boys stay on in Chicago. Some of them in chinuch, some in rabbanos, and some of them in business. It's a nice city. It's a tremendous opportunity. I think it's a tremendous opportunity.
First of all, Shus Rav Schachter, it's always special to team up with Rav Schachter. It's always a special privilege. And I'm going to pick up on something that Rav Schachter mentioned. My father always told me that, I'm not sure if this is historically true, even my father was a historian. He said that when he was about to finish smicha, that was the first time that the yeshiva was thinking of opening up a post-smicha kollel. Is that true? Or it might have been even earlier. Somebody else told me something. No, they had this idea before. It doesn't really matter. And what Rav Schachter said before, which was there was a lot of pressure. My father told me there was a lot of pressure, to go out and to earn a parnasa. And, he was tempted. I think Rabbi Lamb told me the same story. He was my father's roommate. They were, contemporaries of the Rav Shir at the same time, the Smicha at the same time. And there was that whole group that was offered this post Smicha Kollel, and all of them felt that they just couldn't afford, literally, or the mentality or the culture was such that while they were a little bit tempted, but I guess not quite enough, and they all went on, and they all actually, that whole group, really had tremendous impact. I consider them to be like the unsung, generation of Rabbanim who were heroes, who knew how to be Talmidim of the Rav and to follow, but in their own right were very talented people. So they're, not necessarily regret. But my father always would say this, and I once spoke to Rabbi Lamb also about it, very wistfully, because it wasn't until many years later when they saw what had developed in our yeshiva, and how really young American Talmidim were becoming Rosh Yeshiva. Really people who made a big name for themselves and had tremendous hashpa'ah. People like Mori V'Rabbi Rav Lichtenstein, Zechrona Livracha, and Ibada L'chaim Aruchim, Rav Schachter, and Rav Willig, and the ones who followed, and became the first American really generation of Talmidei Chachamim. My father said that then he was very wistful about having passed up on that opportunity, even though he understood that it would have been difficult for him at that time. Rabbi Lamb told me the same thing. So I think it's a big bracha, that we live in a time where before we even speak about going out of town in Chicago, in the Chicago Kollel more particularly, which I'll get to in a second. But Rabbi Brand, I asked him, what's our theme for the day? He said, it's important for Talmidim to realize that they don't have to be in such a hurry, and that the extra investment, and this is a theme that we, the Rebbeim and the Rosh Kollel in particular, we believe in very, very strongly, that if it's possible, not at hardship to one's wife or family, but because there are mechanisms today, funding mechanisms, the extra years of learning have a geometric or impact, and I think we've seen this in the regular Kollel and the Kollel Elyon in our yeshiva, and in the satellite Kollelim that we have, especially Chicago. The ability to learn the extra years, is the difference between being a functional Rav, which is very important, and being beginning the path of being a young Talmid Chacham. And the fact that we have expanded the curriculum, in a lishma kind of a way, which confuses the donors sometimes. We tend to learn, a lot of anything we want, anything and everything, like in the post-Smicha Kollelim, both here and actually Chicago has, talk more about Chicago in a second, has really followed that as well. A lot of Kadshim, some Zraim, mikvaos, things like that, which really highlight that, of course, in addition to training for halacha l'maisa, which is obviously very crucial, and that's a core elemental thing. But the idea that we want to produce a young Talmidei Chachamim, because we believe that, when you educate, to the persona, that the benefits as an investment in who that person is and the impact they'll have in the community, is really really enormous. We believe that, the Chafetz Chaim has a terrific hakdama to his Sefer Likutei Halachos, which he wrote on Kadshim, where he discusses the fact, he says that people criticized him, for focusing on Kadshim. They said, there's so many terrible, challenges, facing us, in this era. Do we really have the luxury, of learning these more exotic limudim? And his response was that dafka in a time of challenges, where we really need to have a touchstone with, Kol Torah Kula and the values of Torah, conceding on creating holistic Talmidei Chachamim, of course, who know what they're doing. If you don't know what you're doing, you don't know how to paskin. That's obviously a psul for being a Rav. But in addition to having the aspiration to be, in the path of Chachmei HaMasorah, That's what we need more than ever. And that was true then, and that is true now. So the idea of spending an extra few years would that we could even extend it further. Not forever, because we, I think, have a philosophy that the Kollel is an investment, for the individual and for the community and for the impact that he'll have. But, we've witnessed the impact, that the post-Smicha Kollel, together with the Smicha Kollel, has had on creating Talmidei Chachamim and changing the narrative, very much so in our communities. So that's point number one. With regard to Chicago in particular, Rabbi Brand is, the first Rosh Kollel, and he went through the Kol Elyon, and from the very beginning has been a very passionate advocate of this idea of Torah Lishma, together with the community, piece and component. What was unique about the Chicago Kollel, and which garnered enthusiastic support, from myself and Rav Schachter and Rav Willig at the time, was the fact that we were somewhat critical that while you had quote unquote kollalim in other places that were more oriented towards community outreach and teaching in the local schools, and didn't really have much of a Torah Lishma or continuing creating Talmidei Chachamim component. And Chicago, from the very beginning, was designed, to be a kollel that was about at least 2 starim, I assume it still is, 2 starim of actual learning. I think one is more halakha l'maisa, the other is more, lumdus. But that's the way it's been from the very beginning, and that I think is the formula that we are comfortable with and proud of, and feel is the right balance, so that we really can compete, in the Olam HaTorah, compete in the, kinasofim tar b'chachma sense of being. We believe in our ideology. We believe in, our derech halimud and our Masorah in all things. And therefore, we want that Masorah, to be out there, but in a way which is l'chavod u'lesifares. I think I was actually in Chicago for that shot. I think we spoke about l'chavod u'lesifares, right? We had a pre-Kollel, when the Kollel was supposed to begin. It was a famous Shabbos in Chicago, which I was happy to participate. I think that's what Rabbi Brand spoke about. The Chavod U'Lesifares. So Chicago, from the very beginning, has been committed, to I think the right balance and combination. And under Rabbi Brand's, real leadership, and a lot of my, excellent Talmidim, guys who finished the Kol Elyon, have been involved from the beginning, and I think that they've really, grown. Aaron Kraft and Goldstein and many, many others who were in the Kol Elyon and then became, I don't know what the official
Rosh Chabura, Rosh Beis
Medrash, giving Chaburas, and they also just grew. Both of those two are still in Chicago, like Rav Schachter said, and there have been others, who also were part of the Kollel who assumed positions in the schools and the shuls. I was very fortunate to be, was it the 15th anniversary a couple of years ago, in which, like Rav Schachter reported before, the excitement of the community, about the impact that the Kollel has had, because it is also very much a community Kollel, that runs a lot of programs for men and for women in the shuls and in the schools, and has really, I think, been very effective in, being marbitz, the Torah of our Beis Medrash. So, we think that it's accomplished a great deal. We have a great deal of pride in it. The third component is, the question of, leaving New York and the tri-state area. There are, of course, advantages being here, and, we want good Talmidim for the Kol Elyon. That's very important to us, to nurture this very mission. But of course, there are communities in throughout the United States that would benefit tremendously from the presence of young Talmidei Chachamim of our hashkafa and our training. We also think that there are, of course, benefits being in smaller communities and communities where each individual can have greater, individual impact. And again, that's something that the Schachter Kollel in Chicago very much feel. So, it's always a question. It's hard to weigh. The best thing is to do both things, which people have done. But either choice is a good choice. The continuing learning, the sense of responsibility to the community, and the different dynamic of either being here or being there, but are both very excellent choices. So I'm very happy to participate in encouraging everybody to consider the option. And I guess I'll
thank you
if you want.
So maybe Rebbe pick up on something that Rav Rosensweig alluded to, which is there is a sense I've heard from many Talmidim that they have to immediately get into the field of chinuch or rabbanus right away. There's this feeling, at least that I'm hearing, and the question is, how do we balance that with the value? What does Rebbe see as the value of taking an extra 2 or 3 years of just Limud Torah, which in our case in Chicago, there's also a lot of programming, but when a young married fellow is thinking, do I run to take that school-based position or should I take a step back? In our case, Baruch Hashem, the Kollel has a very generous salary. It's, for starting fellows, it's over $60,000 with a little bit of life insurance and parsonage and a moving stipend, all these things where financially it makes sense. How seriously should somebody take that opportunity to invest in themselves before they go to teach?
My impression is that the more one prepares himself, if you learn another year and another year, not to learn forever, that you have the grandfathers learning in the same curve with the great-grandchildren. You learn for a couple of more years. So even if you're going to teach first grade, even if you're going to teach Haschalas Chumash or Haschalas Mishnayos, if you know more. When I was in elementary school, I was born in the middle of the Second World War. So when I was in elementary school, I was fortunate. My Rabbeim were people who learned in yeshivas in Europe. I had Rabbi Yankelevich in elementary school, and other Talmidei Chacham also like that in elementary school. They knew all the Gemaras with all the Pnei Yeshuas and all the Rashbos. They were teaching us Chumash and Rashi. They were teaching us Gemara with Rashi. Simple things. The more you prepare yourself in advance, so the better you'll be able to teach the elementary things, whatever level you're going to teach on. You'll be more prepared to teach.
And then Rebbe maybe could speak to for a minute. In Chicago, we have a balance which we're always trying to strike between, as Rav Rosensweig said, in the morning we're learning Gemara, in the afternoon we learn Halacha, we have Bechinas, and at the same time, at night we're learning with Balabatim, on Sunday mornings learning with Balabatim, in the kids' programs. Why does Rebbe think that this is a model that Rebbe has supported for so many years? Why is this important for young fellows who are matriculating in the Kollel, finishing the Kollel, in the middle of the Kollel, wherever they are? Why is this a good model rather than saying, I just want to learn for myself? Why does Rebbe think that it's valuable?
You have an influence on the whole community. When I visited there in Chicago, they say, every time I visit, they say, the Kollel has a tremendous hashpah on the whole city. The children look up to all the people, and they have someone to look up to. These are fine young men, normal, they're married, they have children, they raise their children. And the younger people look up to them, and the Balabatim respect them.
Baruch Hashem, now we have 20 alumni who are still living in Chicago. Several of our alumni moved to Israel, several taken positions in different shuls in America, but that presence of the 20 alumni, whether it's in a school or in a shul, that has a significant hashpah. As the Rebbe said, we now have 2 fellows, one who just finished the Kollel, one who is just starting the Kollel, who participated in Kollel programs as elementary school students.
Oh.
One of them remembers, we did such and such a program 15 years ago, such a thing, and now he's... So I think I'm curious to hear Rav Rosensweig's take on this on this balance as well, because it's a little bit different than just the Kol Ha'olim where you have just the Limud HaTorah, but it's kind of like a transition period, so to speak, where, as Rav Rosensweig has spoken about Asham and Tamura and many topics, it's that type of hybrid that we're trying to accomplish. I'm curious your thoughts on that.
As I said before, I do think there are different models. I think that the common denominator is that in our broader hashkafa, like Rav Schachter said before, we believe that the extra learning, of course, is always foundational for the person, and it's the Rav Schachter said a second ago that his own experience and his belief, and I totally concur with this. That even if you're teaching, Hatchalas Mishnayos, if you're a Gavra who's, Roy Lahoros B'chol Torah Kula, that makes a difference. But it's not just because you can then teach it better and more accurately. Young children already, have a good instinct. They know when they're, when they're confronted with a serious, authentic, person. And I too had, in both in elementary school and high school, was exposed to, people who, from their point of view, it was certainly a step down, that they were teaching on that level. And certainly the Talmidim often didn't appreciate them. But, those who did, or at least, the Mafreya who did, the hashpah is really tremendous because you really were exposed to people who, walking Sefer Torah, who really represent something, and that, it's I can't explain it scientifically, but I just know it to be true that authenticity, that stature is something that is, very inspirational, and it's very, mashpia, in every way. Like always to say, like the more Balamor and Rambans that it'll also rub off no matter what level, you teach or interact. Even if you decide, not to go into Rabbanos but to be a Balabas, it transforms who you are. So I think that is a very crucial idea. But the idea that we are investing in the holistic personality and his impact, and that the goal, of course, is personal growth, but personal growth which then is shared with the tzibur, that can take different forms. And a place like the Chicago Kollel, by training the young Avrechim, also to teach and also to speak in the shuls. We try to do that here also, but the opportunities are much, much greater, out of town for that, I think. And, that too is part of the investment, is, just being able to relate it, to transmit your Torah on different levels to different kinds of audiences. So I think it's a very constructive. One can spend some years just, in 3 starim in full immersion, in Torah, and sometimes, one feels like you're ready to share, or different personalities, different, sense of timing. But I think there are 2 good choices. It's not a right choice or a wrong choice. They're both consistent with the philosophy of personal learning and growth, and the idea that is an investment, and it's an investment that always pays off one way or another. And at the same time, how you do that exactly, what the exact balance is within reason, it are very good, different but good options that I think we can applaud.
For us, we could do both. Fellows can learn here at the Catskill, the Kol Ha'olim, and then they can come to Chicago.
Yeah,
we do
100%. As they have.
Yes.
We've had a number of.
I wanted to come back to something that Rav Rosensweig alluded to, that Rebbe spoke about when we started this initiative, that Rebbe mentioned 18 years ago that there are other yeshivas that have many kollel in different places, and that it's important that our yeshiva that has a unique and distinct hashkafa and a specific mesorah, that we should also have kollel. So maybe Rebbe could expound on that a little bit for the Talmidim, why it's important that we should celebrate and teach and share our Masorah of our yeshiva in the community.
There's a lot of exaggeration in a lot of the yeshivas. They exaggerate one aspect of Torah, other aspects. In our yeshiva, we have much less exaggeration. I don't want to knock the other yeshivas, but it's totally different here. So we have to present to the Balabatim. It doesn't have to be so exaggerated. They just had an Eretz Yisrael that had this whole Yom HaTzeret. I think it was utterly ridiculous. The country is at war, and no one wants to go to the army. I think the whole thing was ridiculous. I don't think anybody from YU would ever participate in such an Hatzeret. The big Talmidei Chachamim, but they exaggerate so much that nothing else counts by them. Here we're more reasonable. Torah is important, this and the war is important, and everything is important. Everything is. You shouldn't exaggerate. Everything just depends on Torah. The Jewish people has to have an army. If everyone's going to sit and learn, the enemy is going to kill all of us. You have to have an army. You have to have other things. So I think our hashkafa is more normal, more reasonable, and we have to present it to the public. They shouldn't think anyone wants Torah is a meshugana. Everything is exaggerated.
Maybe a thought on this synthesis?
Yeah, I mean, again, I guess this is like a Torah Mana question, but which is fine. But I'll say it in my own way. But it's really not, much. Baruch Hashem. I think we're all on the same page. We do believe that in a more balanced approach to things. And I think the key thing is that we don't believe that our balance is a compromise in the comprehensiveness of our commitment to Limud Torah and to Avodas Hashem. We think exactly the opposite. We think that Torah defines our perspective on all things, and that includes all the miktzos HaTorah and the values that they represent. So it definitely includes Hilchos Malachim and Hilchos Milchama and Hilchos Ishus and Choshen Mishpat and all the different aspects of Ben Adam Lamakom, Ben Adam Lechaveru. So from my point of view, what the yeshiva represents is actually a more idealistic and a more maximalist approach, to Torah, as opposed to one which is narrower. And as such, we should be proud of that Masorah. I think it is true, we've spoken about this a lot in the past, that our more balanced perspective, and I believe our more aspirational perspective, is also more complex to implement. If you only have, one emphasis, so things are more black and white, and it's, you can usually, with ease determine, whether you're on course, or not. And if you believe that, Kol Torah Kula is, part of your shikul and your hashkafas hachayim and the decisions that you make in your actual life. So it is more complex and it's more challenging, and I think we have to acknowledge that. Sometimes we can make it clearer and simplify it so that people have, a better understanding of where we're coming from. But part of the comprehensiveness and the balance, which is what, recommends this, hashkafa and halachic approach, comes with making difficult decisions. We should do much a better job in our hasbara about what we really stand for. But the point is that none of this is a compromise. This is actually a more aspirational way, I think, to be an Oved Hashem. So we should be proud of our Masorah, and we should, therefore be very motivated to, as I say, to compete in a good way in the kinasofim tar b'chachmo sense, in the conversations, the marketplace of Torah ideas, we should be, very clear about our lechatchila commitment to what we stand for. And, if it was up to me, wish I would be happier if we had kollalim in many cities. We've discussed this in the past in America, and if they were very aspirational kollalim, meaning, that the best part of our base medrash, meaning that the level and the commitment and the idealism and so on and so forth was, obvious to everyone. I think we would have much more hashpa'ah as an approach if that were the case. The yeshiva itself, hasn't always made this a priority in terms of their, financially or otherwise. And I've been very critical of that over the years. I know that Rav Schachter and myself and Rav Willig and, we've always tried to push, for expanding, the role of our base medrash. Just haven't always succeed. There's also practical issues in terms of getting people, to take seriously the possibility of going to other places, etc. But that, for me, has always been it's a bit of a disappointment that the yeshiva hasn't, been involved as extensively as I think they should, in competing. And again, when I say competition, again, I only mean it not that much financial competition. The administrators sometimes try to figure out how many extra students will they get if they. And again, I'm not an administrator, so it's not my responsibility to make sure that the tuitions come in and that the people are coming. So it's easy for me to ignore that part of it. That's the luxury that I have. But for me, I mean it in the sense of again, the discussion, the shuk of ideas of halacha and hashkafa. And I would like to see us much more involved in a broader way. So I always applaud the programs that we do have that are true and authentic to that mission. I think are very important.
So maybe I'll just conclude following up on that one idea, coming back to Rav Schachter for one last thought, which is that, as Rav Rosensweig talked about, the integrity of the beis medrash, the hasmada, the limud, the bechinas, the rigorous nature of the learning. So in the morning, we're doing usually masechtas that ordinarily we wouldn't cover in the yeshiva, so the fellows can expand. So whether it's the second half of Pesachim or Yuma or Zvachim, Menachos, Tamura, we've done over the years. And then in the afternoon, we have chosen oftentimes a halacha l'maisa limud, different than the traditional smicha limud, usually something a little bit different. And Rav Schachter has given always the shir psicha at the beginning of the year and different chaburas. So maybe Rabbi can speak to a little bit why it is that it's important, at least for us, to have a Gemara Seder in the morning, which is one type of limud and kachim, and then in the afternoon to have halacha l'maisa. Last couple of years we did Hilchos Pesach, Hilchos Yantif, things that are very practical. Why is it important to have both of those as part of the limud and the kollel?
The limud of the whole mitzvah of Talmud Torah, l'madatem osam v'shmartem l'asosam. You're supposed to learn Torah. You're supposed to learn all the mitzvahs in order to know how to observe them. If you don't learn halacha l'maisa, it's a joke. It's a leitzonis. Anytime a shayla comes up, you say, yeah, it's a machlokes hatarayim. So what's the din? Don't tell me machlokes. What's the din halacha? You have to know. You have to have the blend of both. Everything is interconnected. Hilchos Yantav is interconnected with the Tmur. Everything is interconnected. Kol Torah kulun yanechad. You have to cover everything. What's the maximum that someone learns in your kollel?
Usually it's been 3 or 4 years is the maximum.
Reasonable. There's 3 or 4 years after they already got smicha.
It depends. Some of the chevra have come during the smicha program. Some of them come after. We even had one fellow who came and he didn't do smicha. He just came to learn in the kollel for a couple of years. And then he became a rebbe. He'll do smicha maybe on the side a little bit. So you have people who come at different stages. One year we did Yoredeya. But other than that, we usually do other types of limudim that'll augment. So every year we have I think it's Chayav Odom, we have to follow the way of the Rebbe. So We follow Rav Schachter's Bechinos. In the morning, we have 10 out of 13 Hebrew questions. But in the afternoon, we don't have so much Rachmanis. You get 20 scenarios. Because let's say we're learning Hilchos Yom Tov. We give 20 scenarios, halacha l'mais. Everybody has to write psak, makor, and hesper. Those are the afternoon topics that the way that we have structured the limud. So every year a different democratic process. Rav Schachter is very democratic. So usually at the end of one year, we'll take a vote with the new fellows what we're going to learn the coming years. So it depends on. We learn Shabbos usually every 3-4 years because it's become obvious that's very important. Although now that the yeshiva learns Shabbos as part of the smicha program, it's changing a little bit. But when we started, we started doing Shabbos every 2-3 years. So depending on the year, we'll take a vote. What everybody, how ambitious people want to be in the morning limud, and then exactly where people are in the halach and limud in the afternoon. So usually people stay 2 or 3 years. You usually get 1 year of Shabbos and then a couple of others depending on what the afternoon schedule is. So I just want to reiterate, this is like, the Mirz Hashem, one day you should all have such a moment. It's like a pinch me moment that I get to sit next to my own Rabbeim as a Talmud to continue what Rav Schachter and Rav Rosensweig have taught me and taught so many of the Chavri HaKollel that we are continuing to learn and teach in the community. And now you have fellows who are in the Kollel who grew up in Chicago who are benefiting for this. So for all of the fellows here who are interested in this type of experience, or if you know somebody, I'm here today. I usually come every month or two during the year just to stay in touch and stay connected and to bring lunch. This is one of our big inyanim. But I'm Makir Tov to Rav Schachter, to Rav Rosensweig, who are literally Rosh V'Rishona, the Miyazdim of this Mossad, of the Kollel we have in Chicago for 18 years. They were the first lunch in Reuben Shul, and from then on, they have come so many times and so many shiurim and chaburas and visits that we are just a hemshech of this yeshiva, and we're grateful to them for their leadership and for Mirz Hashem, for those Talmidim who would like to find out more and be more involved. I'll be around this afternoon and happy to share my information. Most people in the REIT's office know how to find me, and I'd like a great shout out to some of the Chicago students who are here, have benefited from the Kollel. So we thank our Rabbeim, we thank all the Talmidim for coming, and wish you bracha v'hatzlacha in all of your learning. Thank you.